The old man sat on the sagging porch of his clapboard house, the paint peeling like memories flaking off a forgotten canvas. His hands, gnarled as the oak tree shading him, clutched a chipped mug of coffee that had long gone cold. At 78, Walter Grissom's eye still held a spark, but it flickered like a candle in a storm. The neighborhood, once alive with children's laughter and the hum of lawnmowers, had grown quiet, swallowed by the slow decay of time and neglect. He'd lived here in Willow Creek, Ohio, for 5 decades, raised 2 daughters, buried a wife, and now faced the twilight alone. The world felt heavy today, heavier than usual, as if the air itself pressed down on his brittle bones. Across the street, the for sale sign on the miller's old place creaked in the wind, a reminder that even the last of his neighbors had fled for brighter prospects. Walter sipped the bitter dregs, his heart whispering a question he couldn't voice. What's left when everyone's gone? The morning sun sliced through the haze, casting long shadows over the cracked sidewalk. Walter's gaze drifted to the mailbox, rusted and leaning like it too was tired of standing. He hadn't checked it in days. Bills and junk mail were all that came now. But something compelled him to shuffle down the steps, his slippers scuffing against the wood. The mailbox squealed as he opened it, revealing a single envelope, yellowed and creased with no stamp or address, just his name scrawled in shaky ink, Walter Grissom. His breath caught, a faint prickle of unease crawling up his spine. He tore it open, and inside was a folded note, the paper brittle as if it had been hidden for years. The words, written in a hand he hadn't seen in decades, hit him like a punch. Meet me at the old oak by the creek. Midnight. You owe me that much. Clara. Clara. His Clara. The name burned through 50 years of buried guilt. Walter's knees buckled and he gripped the mailbox to steady himself. The scent of her lavender perfume flooded his senses, unbidden, as if she were standing there, her dark eyes piercing him like they had when they were young. Clara had been his first love, the girl he'd promised forever to before life, and his own cowardice tore them apart. She'd left Willow Creek in 1973, pregnant and heartbroken, after Walter chose duty over love, marrying Ellen because it was the right thing to do. He hadn't seen Clara since, hadn't dared to speak her name. She'd died, or so he'd heard, 20 years ago in a car accident out west. The note trembled in his hands. This was impossible. A cruel prank. Or worse. The day dragged, each tick of the kitchen clock a hammer against Walter's skull. He sat at the table, the note spread before him, its edges curling like accusations. The house creaked around him, the silence broken only by the distant bark of a dog and the faint hum of a car passing through. He remembered Clara's laugh, bright as summer, and the way her fingers brushed his when they danced under the oak by the creek. He'd been 22. Fearless until the moment she told him about the baby. His family, his church, his small town, world, they'd all demanded he walk away. And he had. The shame of it had gnawed at him ever since, a quiet rot he'd never confessed, not even to Ellen. Now, this note. Was it a ghost, a trick, or something darker, some reckoning for his sins? By dusk, Walter's resolve hardened. He'd go to the creek. If it was a prank, he'd face it. If it was something else, well, he'd lived long enough to know fear was a poor excuse for hiding. He pulled on his old wool coat, the one Ellen had patched a dozen times, and grabbed his cane. The night air was crisp, smelling of damp earth and decaying leaves. The streets of Willow Creek were empty, the streetlights casting pools of yellow that flickered like dying stars. The creek wasn't far, just past the edge of town where the pavement gave way to gravel and the world felt wilder. The oak still stood, its gnarled branches clawing at the sky, a sentinel over memories Walter had tried to bury. He reached the tree just before midnight, his breath puffing in the cold. The creek babbled softly, its water catching the moonlight like scattered coins. Walter's heart thudded, each beat a reminder of how fragile he'd become. He leaned against the oak, its bark rough under his palm, and waited. The note had said midnight, but the minutes stretched and doubt crept in. Maybe he'd misread it. Maybe age had finally cracked his mind. Then, a rustle in the shadows. A figure emerged, small and hunched, moving with the careful steps of someone older than Walter. The moonlight revealed a face etched with time, wrinkled, weathered, but unmistakable. Clara. "Walter," she said, her voice a dry whisper like leaves skittering across pavement. She wore a faded shawl, her gray hair thin and wild. Her eyes, though, were the same, sharp, searching, carrying a hurt that hadn't dulled in 50 years. Walter's mouth went dry, words failing him. This wasn't possible. Clara was dead. He'd seen the obituary, hadn't he? Or had he only heard rumors, letting them settle into truth? "You came," she said, stepping closer. The scent of lavender hit him again, faint but undeniable. "I didn't think you would." "Clara." "How?" His voice cracked, barely audible. "They said you died." She laughed, a sound both bitter and soft. "I let them think that. Easier that way. After you left me, I couldn't stay. I raised our daughter alone, Walter. She's gone now, too. Cancer. But she knew about you. She always wanted to know you." The words landed like a blade. Our daughter. Walter's cane slipped and he stumbled, catching himself against the tree. A daughter. His daughter. Dead before he'd ever known her name. The shock of it was a physical thing, a weight crushing his chest. "Why didn't you tell me?" he rasped. "I would've." "Would you?" Clara's voice sharpened, cutting through his excuses. "You made your choice. I didn't come here to drag up the past, Walter. I came because I'm dying. Really, this time, and I needed to see you, to forgive you. Forgive." The word hung between them, heavy as the night. Walter's eyes burned, tears spilling before he could stop them. He wanted to beg, to explain, but the years had stolen his defenses. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I was a coward. I've carried it every day." Clara's expression softened, just a fraction. She reached into her shawl and pulled out a small, worn photo. "Her name was Lily," she said, handing it to him. The girl in the picture had Clara's eyes, and Walter's stubborn jaw. She was smiling, standing by a lake, maybe 20 years old. She was kind, braver than both of us. Walter's fingers trembled as he traced the photo. The grief was immediate, a tidal wave of loss for someone he'd never met. "I didn't know," he said, voice breaking. "Clara, I didn't know." She watched him, her gaze steady but not cruel. "I hated you for a long time," she admitted. "But hate's a heavy thing to carry. Lily taught me that. She'd want you to know. Her even now." They stood in silence, the creek's murmur filling the space between them. Walter's mind raced, piecing together the life he'd missed. Clara's forgiveness felt like a gift he didn't deserve, and yet it cracked something open inside him. A hope he thought he'd lost. "What do you need from me?" he asked finally. "Why now?" Clara hesitated, then reached into her shawl again, pulling out a small, leather-bound journal. "Lily's words," she said. "Her stories, her thoughts. She wrote them for you, even if she never sent them. I want you to have it, and there's a girl in town, Sarah. She's Lily's daughter, your granddaughter. She doesn't know you, but she's struggling, alone, like I was. She needs someone, Walter, a granddaughter." The revelation was another shock, a jolt that made the world feel both smaller and infinitely larger. Sarah, a name to hold on to. Walter clutched the journal, its weight grounding him. "Where is she?" he asked, his voice steadier now, fueled by a sudden, fierce purpose. "Living in the old Miller place," Clara said. "She's 19, working 2 jobs, trying to keep the lights on. She's got Lily's fire, but she's drowning. I can't help her anymore, but you can." Walter nodded, the decision made before he fully understood it. "I will," he said. "I swear it." Clara's eyes softened, and for a moment, she was the girl he'd loved under this same oak, her smile a flicker of warmth in the cold. "That's enough," she said. "That's all I needed." She turned, her shawl catching the moonlight, and walked back into the shadows. Walter called after her, but she was gone, leaving only the scent of lavender and the journal in his hands. He didn't sleep that night. He sat at his kitchen table reading Lily's journal by lamplight. Her words were vivid, full of humor and pain, dreams and regrets. She wrote of her mother's strength, her own battles with illness, and a quiet wish to know the father she'd never met. Each page was a knife, but also a bridge, connecting Walter to a life he'd failed but could still honor. By dawn, he knew what he had to do. The Miller place was a sagging duplex, its windows dark except for one faint glow. Walter stood on the cracked sidewalk, clutching the journal, his heart pounding like he was 20 again. He knocked, and after a long pause, the door opened. A girl stood there, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes wary but kind. She had Clara's gaze, Lily's jaw. Walter's breath caught. "Sarah?" he said. She frowned, gripping the door. "Who are you?" "I'm Walter," he said, faltering. "I knew your mother, and your grandmother. He held out the journal, his hands shaking. "I'm your grandfather. I didn't know until last night. I'm here now, though, if you'll have me." Sarah's eyes widened, shock giving way to suspicion. "My grandmother's dead. What is this?" Walter took a breath, the weight of 50 years in his voice. "Clara came to me, she gave me this." He opened the journal, showing her Lily's handwriting. "I made mistakes, Sarah. Big ones. But I want to make it right. For your mom. For you." She stared at the journal, then at him, her expression softening as tears welled. "I don't even know you," she whispered, but she didn't close the door. "I know," Walter said, "but I'd like to change that. If you'll let me." Sarah hesitated, then stepped aside, letting him in. The duplex was sparse, the air smelling of cheap coffee and damp plaster. They sat at a wobbly table, and Walter told her everything. Clara, Lily, the choices that haunted him. Sarah listened, her hands wrapped around a mug, her face a mix of doubt and longing. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "I've been alone a lot," she said finally, her voice small. Mom died when I was 12. Clara, tried, but she was sick too. I didn't know about you. I didn't know about you either, Walter said, his voice thick. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. Sarah's eyes met his, and for the first time Walter saw hope there, fragile but real. She reached across the table, her hand brushing his. Okay, she said softly. Let's start there. Over the next weeks, Walter became a fixture in Sarah's life. He brought groceries when her paycheck ran short, fixed the leaky faucet she couldn't afford to repair, and listened as she talked about her dreams of college, her fears of failing. He shared stories of Lily, piecing together a mother Sarah had lost too soon. The neighborhood noticed the change. The old man who'd been a ghost now walked with purpose, a girl at his side. Sarah's laugh, bright as Clara's, echoed down the street, and Walter's porch felt less lonely. One evening, as they sat under the oak by the creek, Sarah handed Walter a new photo. It was the two of them, smiling, the tree's branches framing them like a promise kept. I think Mom would have liked this, Sarah said, her voice steady. You showing up. Walter's throat tightened. I think so too. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Walter felt the weight of his years lift, just a little. Kindness, he realized, wasn't just a moment. It was a choice, a spark that could light up even the darkest corners. He looked at Sarah, her face glowing with possibility, and knew he'd been given a second chance, not to erase the past, but to build something new. The creek whispered beside them, carrying their story forward, and Walter thought of Clara, her forgiveness a gift that had changed everything. In the quiet of that moment, he understood. Even at the end of a long life, a single act of love could rewrite the ending.